Shaili. Thanks for talking to us.
Hello.
Let's start from the start. How did the Gillow repertory idea germinate in the first place?
So, I used to conduct creative drama workshops much before I started Gillow, and this was during the summer vacations in Bombay, because I was actually trying to train myself to write for children, as in storybooks.
Okay.
So I figured that there's no particular training for this, but I can do different kinds of explorations and activities and sort of train myself to write books for children. So one of the things which I started with was doing arts-based workshops for children in the summer, and that led from one thing to another. And I was also working with the IPTA, the Indian People's Theatre Association, at that time. And they suggested that since you're doing so much in the children's space, why don't you direct a play? So I directed a play for the organization. This was, I think, 2008 or 9. And after that, I was selected to go to Germany, actually, for a director's workshop, which was specially for those people directing plays for children. And most of the work that was being done across the world and the people who were represented at that workshop were people who were directing plays with adult actors. And the work that I had done was a mix of children and adults on stage. And I had only done one play at that point.
Okay.
Before that, I had also had ideas of, like I said, I wanted to write stories for children, and I wanted to also get into publishing, which hasn't happened, just so you know.
Okay.
So that was probably 20 years ago, and where I wanted to do that, and theatre came along before the publishing happened, and one thing led to the other, and I got to see, when I traveled to Germany for this 10-day workshop, how theatre for children is such a rigorous field in so many countries, and it was very inspiring. So Gillow actually was supposed to be a sort of arts and media company, but after that workshop that I participated in, I thought that theatre is where I come from, and I want to work with children. So why don't I first do theatre for children and then look at the books and educational material and various other ideas that I had, of this really large organization which would do all kinds of things for children. Mm-hmm. You name it and we would do it, Mm-hmm. Was the dream. But the theatre came up, and then when I came back to India in August of 2009, I said, okay, let me give a push to what I thought I would start 10 years before that. And in December of 2009, I formally started the Gillow repertory, and it just began like that. It was pretty organic, you could say, the way it all started. And we produced our first play for a public performance in the summer of 2010.
Okay. So it's also children-centric. I just see that, even your theatre work around theatre, and 90% of what Gillow does, are the plays that Gillow does, is based on children's book, adaptations from children's book. Versus, you had other options. There are other options of basing your plays on. Why did you choose children's books?
So when I started directing plays for children, I had the option of either picking up an existing script which had been written by a playwright in Hindi or English or Marathi. At that point, I was working mostly Hindi and English. And the other option was to get a contemporary playwright to write a particular script for me, based either on my idea or on their own idea, a play which has not been produced before. I did explore both these options, and I didn't get much success. In terms of, like, the old scripts were very dated, and many people had already explored those texts, and they didn't really excite me at that point. And after having worked for almost, at that time, probably was about 7 or 8 years of working with children, I just felt that the old texts were not speaking to children of today. And I felt that the storybooks were more in tune with the current generation as per their age specificity. And also, storybooks are more age specific than a piece of dramatic text that was existing at that time. So, and because I love books and I've been collecting children's books for decades now, and I wanted to write books for children, so it became like an automatic, choice. And there were many stories which I really loved, and I had dreamt of having them on stage, So it wasn't like I decided that I want to dramatize books. It just that it felt as the natural choice at that point. And I did ask a couple of well-known writers at that time, and nobody was interested in writing for children. So, and I didn't really consider myself a playwright at that point. So I decided to adapt the stories myself. And without any kind of writing experience, I just dived into it, and I wrote the scripts and directed them myself. So that's how it began.
Tell us specifically about the first play. It's a very interesting story about your first play, the one you based on the book.
The first play that I based on a book was not produced by Gillow, but the second play was based actually on a story written by children in a workshop, which was called Suar Chala Spacescope, which is a science fiction comedy kind of thing. But that wasn't based on a book. And then the next play that I did was based on Mahashweta Devi's story Kyun Kyun Ladki, which is the YY girl, which is a favorite of many people that I know.
Right.
I would say that the way I have worked on most of my scripts over the years, which are especially based on books, has been more about sharing what the book made me feel, sharing what the book triggered in me and the joy that it gave, just sharing that with children. Not really about telling them the story or explaining what the story means or keeping exactly the same perspective as the author, but keeping it a little more open for interpretation. And that's why most of the works have been an adaptation and not a dramatization of the original text.
So where do you perform typically?
Typically now, I mean, in the early stages, we were all like trial and error, where we would get an opportunity to perform. But now, after 10 years of performing regularly all over the country, it's the maximum shows that we do is at schools. So schools invite us, and then they set apart some time where a certain section of children, like maybe grade 1, 2, and 3, or 4, 5, or 6, 7, 8, depending on the play and the age group that it's meant for. Accordingly, the school would designate which classes would watch the play. So school shows is something that we do a lot, not necessarily in a formal auditorium, but any kind of space in the school. Sometimes the schools bring the children to a theatre. It depends. It's the school's choice, and also the difficulties of getting permission to take children outside school. So all those practical issues are there. But a lot of shows for dedicated school audience. We also perform at theatre festivals for children across the country. There are not that many, but there are a handful, and we do get invited pretty regularly for that. We also perform at birthday parties or any occasion that a group of parents would like to invite us for. We've done few shows like that every year. And we do shows in public venues. Like in Mumbai, we would perform at a Prithvi Theatre or an NCPA, or there's a small auditorium at the St. Andrews Center for Philosophy and Performing Arts, which has about a capacity of say 60-70 audience. So we do perform in alternate venues, in a bookshop or in a library. And apart from this, we've also been performing as part of our bus tour, where we take a bus full of actors and we perform in the villages and small towns. So these are the various types of spaces, from formal to non-formal spaces that we've been performing at.
So you bring books alive.
Well, we try to. But I would say actually the books bring something alive in us, and it's that joy and life that we try to put back into a live performance.
Using theatre to do that. So have you noticed, in your years of performance, that this kindles an interest in children in reading in books? Have you noticed that children want to read more after watching play perform?
So we usually make it a point to show the book either at the beginning of the play or at the end of a play, depending on what play it is. And we do show the book to children, and sometimes we have sold books as well, and sometimes we've just had copies of the book where children can see the book after the show and then go home, and then we tell the parents where they can purchase the book from. So definitely the children are excited. Many times they have read the book and they then tell us, this was not there in the storybook, or this was there and you didn't do that, or this character was a girl but in the play it's become a boy. And other such things. So they're very curious about why we made those changes, or why we made the additions, or some name change or something like that. So we sometimes do apologize, give a disclaimer in the beginning that those of you who've read the book, we apologize for any changes that we've made, but we've taken the author's permission. So you have to watch it for the pinch of salt. Yeah, because children can get very upset, when the book is not exactly represented on stage.
Okay. So very clearly, you have an envious collection of curated books, clearly visible there. And how important is reading? And you as a voracious reader, what is your message to parents or educators or to reader raisers in that context?
I would say that we ourselves have to be readers first. I'm not the first person who's saying this. Almost everybody who's involved in raising readers says the same thing, that you lead by example. So that's something that I would say that parents should also read, not pretend read, see, I'm reading, so you also take a book and you read, but genuinely reading as part of their life, which shows children the importance of books and reading without underlining the importance. So I think that is very important. Secondly, I feel parents should let children read what they want. Of course, you provide a range of books for them to read, but a lot of times parents, their own choices dominate, and they're like, oh, such and such writer, I don't like such and such writer, or this particular style of books are very abstract, I don't want to give my child, or this has too much violence, or this, maybe Goosebumps series or something like that. A lot of parents don't want to give. Maybe in the early years, till they're about 6 or 7, much more curating, and then after that, letting them, try out and taste different kinds of text. Of course, there are exceptions, and there does become a case sometimes of children getting obsessed with a certain type of book or a certain author or a certain series, which may not be age appropriate. Those then have to be handled case by case. But I would still say that children should be given opportunities to read things which even their parents don't like, which is important. And I think that happens more through school libraries and other community libraries. So joining a library, because it's expensive to have so many books at home, and then children outgrow those books. Also, sometimes they hang on to one book and read it 100 times in a month, literally. So if you're in a library, then you've given the book back. So, you know,
Yeah.
that is not there, that they get stuck on a particular book, which is also not actually a problem.
Yeah.
It has its own sort of pluses. I have a few books behind me, which I used to read as a 5-year-old, and they're in tatters, and I still have them.
Right.
It's just that they're taped and they're put inside the protective envelope and kept so that nobody just picks it up.
Seriously?
Yes. Not that many, about 5 or 6. Yeah.
Is that your way of, I was just, you have consciously chosen to work with young audiences, with children.
Yeah.
And, this example that you mentioned of, keeping your childhood memory of a book so neatly inside an envelope. So is your choice to work with young audience in a way to keep your childhood memories intact, or what, what?
I don't think that's a purpose. I mean, I don't look at that as an aim. My work is more now for children, because the children are not acting on stage. All the plays that we have, the actors are all adults.
Okay.
The adult actors who are trained to perform, they're trained in drama, and we also have orientation towards pedagogy and education and methodology of, how do you work with children. And we don't have children on stage in our play. So in this whole space of performing for children, it's a very conscious choice, because I've realized that it's a vast space. There's a lot of in-depth work that it requires. There's a lot of rigor required, research, and constantly learning, about children, from children, about theatre for children from across the world. And I just realized some years ago that if I want to do this well, then I should fully focus on it instead of doing theatre for adults and theatre for children. So I actually made a very conscious choice to stop doing theatre for adults. And then it took 3-4 years for people to stop asking me. At that time, I was designing plays for adults, costume design, set design, light design. I wasn't directing plays for adults. But very often people, it's almost like, you've done work for children's theatre, and the logical next step is to now, you've practiced on children, and then now you can make plays for adults, which is supposed to be the sort of progression. And here I am, like many others, who've decided that the progression is within this space and within this audience. And just going deeper and deeper into the kind of work that we do and the text that we present, and the way we stimulate the audience, and what triggers we want them to be stimulated with, and just constantly working on that. It's such a vast field that now there is no time and space, mental space also, to think about theatre for adults. So I'm quite happy with the challenge that I have in front of me. Adults I'm not interested in.
And I also read in your introductory note that you are consciously now training your team to design and to conduct specifically for children. Is that tougher? I know from a theatrical preparatory point of view, is that a tougher challenge to simplify things for children, or you just present it as is, you're not judging?
You're asking me 2 questions, because one is about training other practitioners to work for children. That's something which I thought was the next step for me, because the work that I will do in my lifetime will be limited. But if I can inspire more people, not just my team members, I have started doing workshops regularly for adult theatre practitioners who want to work for children, or sometimes even work with children. So I've been doing a workshop on children's theatre at the Ninasam Theatre Institute in Shimoga district regularly now since the past 2 years. They've been inviting me, and like that, many other places where I have been doing workshops for theatre artists who may not have worked in the space of children's theatre before, but in the hope that they would learn about it and be inspired to make a contribution in that, and make children's theatre a part of their other arts practice. because we need more people to give their time and effort to creating artistic experiences for children. A lot of times adults feel that if you do something for children, that means you have to teach or it has to be educational. But it's not necessary. We're here as artists to provide an artistic experience for children. It's a cultural experience for them. It doesn't have to be focused on educating them about some concepts or values. Those things happen incidentally anyways. So a lot of people I know who are established artists are a little wary of doing work for children because they feel then they have to talk down to children or they have to do simple things or artistically their work has to be simplified. But that's not the case. If you look at what work is happening across the world and now even in India, you don't have to simplify. You have to just understand your audience and create your piece, your art accordingly. And I don't think that doing work for children means simplifying. It's just the way you communicate changes, but it can still be very complex. And children do have higher capacity to engage with the abstract than adults. So in a very fundamental manner. So I totally don't buy that thing of simplicity as far as children are concerned.
What if you had to call out or recollect a few memorable moments in your Kilo journey, what would they typically be? Preparing, or maybe you saw a child's response to a certain play. Think those one or two moments that you can recollect.
So I remember we had a show at the Prithvi Theatre a few years ago, and there was one group of children from an NGO that Prithvi Theatre had coordinated, because in the summer holidays when they have shows, they make it a point to also invite children from underserved backgrounds. So there was this one group that had come in, and they said after the show, can you just talk to them for 15-20 minutes with your actors on stage? So we said, okay. So there were these 25 children. They must have been like probably 10 to 13, 14 years old. And they were speaking in English, Hindi, Marathi, mixed, because in Bombay, most people are, multilingual. And I remember one question, this child must have been all of 10 years old. And that play had a lot of music in it. And the girl, she asked me, how do you choose the music at each point in the play? How do you choose the instruments to be used, and how do you choose what the music should sound like? What are the things that you keep in mind? And luckily the musicians were there, and then with their help we tried to explain about how we go on the mood. And she wanted to know whether the director or the writer gives instructions to the music people, or do they decide on their own? And so I thought that was like a really good question at that point from a very young person. And there was another instance where we were performing in Pune, and before a play, we usually say that the play is meant for the children. So you don't need to explain, because a lot of times parents sit next to their child, and as the play is going on, the parents are giving a running commentary like in a cricket match. देखो अभी वो उधर गया, अब वो ऐसे बोल रहा है, वो उसका फ्रेंड है, देखो वो गुस्सा हो गया, अभी उसने क्या बोला, आपको समझ में आया? And there's this constant buzz in the auditorium. So in our early a couple of years, we realized that the parents were distracting children from actually being able to engage with the performance. So we then started telling the parents that you don't instruct the children during the performance unless there is a child is screaming and shouting or whatever. But otherwise, you don't need to explain. The child will understand and will engage. And if they don't get something, they'll ask you afterwards. So don't be worried about it. Just let it go with the flow, and you experience the play as an individual audience. And then you can share with your child, what their interpretation is and what yours is. So that, what happened in Pune once when I said that before the play, after the show was over, there was this little boy, must have been like 5.5. And he's asking his mother, Mommy, you understood the whole play? Because if you didn't understand, I will explain to you at home. because I understood everything. And that auntie said that the place for children and adults may not understand. So maybe you didn't understand everything.
My God. Okay. That's hilarious.
So I remember this child. I mean, this conversation was all in Marathi, but that's the sort of gist of it. So yeah, there have been many instances. Sometimes it's non-verbal. It's just the gleam in the children's eyes when they're watching the play, or they're watching and they lean forward because they're so curious to what's going to happen next. They're so involved, even their body language. They're watching something and the character bends down, and the children would also bend and see what's going on, and they have to look like that. And if the character looks behind them at something imaginary, most of the time, especially the younger children, say below 9 years, they'll all turn behind to see what that person is looking at. Or if they look inside the wings, then they want to see that, okay, now something is going to come. But with the older children, they know that it's supposed to be imaginary, so they just they're more adult in their sort of response. So that I find very fascinating, how the audience behavior keeps changing, not only age to age, but also depending on how much live performance that child has had an experience of watching. Because sometimes it's an older child, but they've never watched a play before. So they're still kind of trying to understand or deal with the devices in a stage performance. So it's very fascinating to see how children make connections and how they interpret what's going on. And for me, actually, it's not so much about the children understanding or us explaining a story, because children are intelligent people. We shouldn't assume that they're not going to understand. What is more important is that they should be engaged in the performance, and it should stimulate them to feel something. It should stimulate them to ask questions. So understanding is not my concern at all. Most of the people keep asking me, this story, do you think the child will understand? And, or after a show, some teacher will stand up and say, okay, who understood the story? Who will explain?
What's the moral?
That's very patronizing. And I feel that's so not required, of children. We should treat them just like we would, the questions we would not ask an adult audience, we should not ask children.
How did the name Gillo come up?
So we were actually looking for an animal mascot, because we were very clear that we are going to be doing work for children, and that automatically we wanted to choose an animal. And we looked at various options, and most of the options were taken either in India or overseas. And then there is all this copyright issues and stuff. So we said we don't want to take an animal which is already popular or associated with a brand. And then we came up with the squirrel, because the squirrel, the particular palm squirrel that we've chosen, which is found across India. It's there from Kerala to Kashmir, and from the desert to the mountains and the seaside and the plateau regions and the northeast. So this particular squirrel is all over India, and it kind of symbolizes for us all the places we want to go to. Right. And that's why the squirrel is our mascot.
And then Gillo came from Guilherme.
Yes. So it was just like a name for the squirrel. So a lot of people still call us Gillo Guilherme. They don't call us Gillo Repertory Theatre or our parent organization, which is Gillo Foundation. So they just assume that our group name is Gillo Guilherme because our email ID is written that way.
Right. I noticed that too. Thanks for talking to us. I'm hoping, since you're so passionate about children's work, I'm just hoping I get to see, the books that you intend to write or maybe publish.
I am working on a couple of stories right now. Hope that. So the lockdown has given me that opportunity to sit and write the stories which I haven't written in all these years, which I wanted to do in the first place.
Amazing.
So that's
so years wishing Gillo and you all the very best for all your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and I'll continue to follow your Facebook page and all the updates that you've been putting there. So all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.